Today's project is possible because we have some amazing donors and supporters. And I want to recognize some of them because they're here in the room. Arca Continental Coca-Cola Southwest Beverages was the first gift we received to launch the Border Brief. So thank you both very much. And when I asked you for that gift, I didn't know we'd be here in San Antonio and I'd be asking for more gifts and to come and actually talk on the panel. But we appreciate your wonderful commitment. The Arizona Community Foundation, represented here by our board member, Adam Lopez-Falk, has been a longtime founding member of the Board of Philanthropy Partnership. Adam, we so appreciate you and your colleagues in the amazing support of the Arizona Community Foundation. The Smart Border Coalition, Century Partners, the New Mexico Heal Fund, which represents a collection of funders from across the state of New Mexico, has made this possible. And lastly, I want to mention the Conalma Health Foundation. Without their support, the Border Briefs project would not have ever come to fruition. This actually came to us during the pandemic, as we were all holed up in our homes, figuring out how to stay relevant, how to be resilient, espousing, cheerleading, encouraging the nonprofit sector to not go out of business at a time where we weren't sure what was going to happen around the globe. We had crazy politics going on. It was just a very crazy time during those 4 years. And as I was working from my wife and I's bedroom in our home with our 5 kids driving me crazy at the time, I was like, I'm on a work call, stop it. Working on with our team in multiple Zoom calls, we came to the decision that one of the things we could do was to help contribute to the narrative about our region. Forever, Mexico City and Washington, D.C. have controlled the message about what happens at the U.S.-Mexico border. And those of us that live here, work here, raise our families here, we know what they both say about our region is largely untrue. We are a whipping boy for everything that is wrong in the political relationship between the countries, largely around immigration. A lot of things get misunderstood, people get picked on, a lot of racism happens, a lot of very ugly things. And so we decided that one of the ways we could push back on that is, what if we put out some publications that said, we don't believe the nonsense that you hear. We want to talk about where we live, where we raise our families, where we engage daily on both sides of the border. My children love it when there's a celebration in our household because I go to Tijuana to get the cakes for our family. And they love being able to tell their friends that their postres came from El Otro Lado, which I don't know if we talk about the Otro Lado here in San Antonio, but in all the other communities along the border, we always say El Otro Lado. We don't say we're going to Mexico, we say Al Otro Lado. And what happens is we have an opportunity to reframe the discussion. But in our work, because as the organization that builds prosperity through leadership, collaboration, and philanthropy, we also want to provide needed information. We're a member network. We have 420 organizations from academia, business and corporate partners, nonprofit organizations, government agencies, grant-making foundations that are part of our network. And it's about 50% US, 50% Mexico. And what do they need? They need help raising money. And how do you raise money? You have to tell your story. And so the second reason we did the Border Briefs is because we need to give our member network information about the realities of our region so they can convince a donor, a funder, a grant maker to come and co-invest with them. And that was the impetus. But then we had to figure out, well, what Border Briefs would we do? We zeroed in on, we had to do one about the border, because a lot of people don't know what the border is. They think, in Florida, they think they're in the US-Mexico border. I don't know how they can draw that. We have a president, and I'm not trying to be political, but he'll draw a Sharpie to include the border anywhere. So it gets interesting. And what happens is we need to reframe and let people know that the border is a vibrant area of over 15 million people, 10 states. There are over 5 million jobs in the United States that are tied to US-Mexican trade. Our work is nonpartisan, but we work closely with both governments, especially the diplomats, and I get asked a question all the time, and I'm glad Consul General Minuti is here because it is a privilege to work daily with the Mexican Diplomatic Corps, because they are incredibly professional and they're doing yeoman's work across our country. No other country other than Mexico has 53 diplomatic outposts helping their diaspora. You know, as an American, when I travel abroad, our diplomats say, be careful, stay away from things. But in Mexico, when you travel, they say, come visit us. We'll help you get married. We'll get you a visa. We'll get you health and wellness services. We'll talk to you about your finances and other things. It's amazing the work that they do. Consul mis respetos, muchísimas gracias. It's rather amazing. And so we zeroed in on 6 briefs. A general one about the border, one on migration, one on public health, one on education, one on the environment, and lastly is the Border Philanthropy Partnership, one on philanthropy. And so today we're going to share a little bit about all of this. First, before we get started, in order to make this project happen, I had to find somebody to help us write the briefs. For the longest time, there was only 3 full-time staff members at Border Philanthropy Partnership. Today, we're almost 10 people. 4 of us are full-time, 2 full-time fiscal sponsor relationships, and 3 part-timers. So it really has grown quite a bit. But we have a dear friend who is an academic at San Diego State University. He is a borderlander. He's one of the original borderland scholars, and his name is Dr. Paul Ganster. Dr. Ganster, I think he dreads my phone calls because I pay him in corned beef sandwiches at a Jewish deli in San Diego. And he's just an amazing guy. And I called him up and he says, oh my gosh, what is my friend Andy gonna ask me to do today? And I said, well, you're retired now, so I've got an idea as to how you can not make your wife crazy, and you're gonna come to work with me. And he says, okay, what do I gotta do? I said, I need you to help me write some border briefs. And I said, this shouldn't be hard for you, because I'm looking in I collect books, and about the last 20 books the guy wrote are all on my shelf, all personally autographed by him. And I said, so this shouldn't be hard for you. So he says, okay, I'll do it. So it's important to understand who this guy is. He's not just some crazy American professor in San Diego that pontificates about the US-Mexico, but he truly is an expert. And I say he's an expert and a well-rounded and renowned person because the government of Mexico presented him with the Premio Otli 2 years ago. So even Mexico recognizes that this guy is the real deal. The UABC, the Universidad Autónoma de Baja California, lo reconoció con el doctorado honoris causa. He was recognized with an honorary honoris causa in Mexico at the Baja California State University, and he's just amazing. So we set out to do this project, and the first I want to do is give a little context around immigration, because that's the thing that gets everybody crazy. And I'm not being partisan, but let's give it a little historical context. We all remember and understand that in 1983, President Ronald Reagan, a Republican, his Vice President, George H.W. Bush, and Speaker of the House of Representatives, a Democrat, Speaker Tip O'Neill, came together and they created a solution for the people in our country. They were undocumented at that time. There were 3 million people, and they created amnesty. And they challenged the House of Representatives in the United States Senate to change the laws in 1983. Since that time, unfortunately, Republicans, Democrats, and independents have done nothing. Nothing. They all point fingers, but the number of immigrants that are here in an undocumented capacity has grown to 12 million. Now, the administration likes to push a figure that says 21 million. That is false. It's been disproven. I'm not here to challenge the President of the United States. I'm not looking for a confrontation. But we can't fix problems until we recognize we have one. And the way you can recognize you have a problem is by talking about it truthfully. The other thing that is important to recognize, and we all know in this room, that 85% of the undocumented population residing in the United States came here through our universities. They came here to study. And when they finished their studies, they chose not to go home. Should they have gone home? That's not for me to decide, but that's where the number comes from. But it's an easier punching bag issue to tell the American people and the world that we have 21 million people undocumented in our country from the US-Mexico border, and let's blame President Biden. That doesn't help us solve a problem. We need to go back and understand that when President George W. Bush and President Vicente Fox were at the heads of each of their countries, they came out with a program in 2001 that was going to grant guest worker status to the undocumented community. Unfortunately, September 11, 2001 changed the world and largely changed the United States and how we operate. That was an unfortunate incident. What was stunning is they said we have too many of the bad guys coming across the border, but not one bad guy from the terrorist activities of September 11th came across the US-Mexico border, but 5 of them did come across the US-Canadian border. We're not talking about building a wall in Canada, nor do I want to. I'm just saying we can't. It's easy to pick on the brown and black community, and that's what's happening. And so we can't allow this to continue. Why are people coming here? For 31 years, I've been doing this work. I've traveled all over Central and South America and Mexico. There are 4 reasons why people come northward. And they're not just coming northward because of right now. They've been coming northward for 300 years. They're coming northward first and foremost because of climate change. Unfortunately, those 2 words, climate change, has become a political whipping boy. And that's unfortunate. So we have to find another way to talk about climate change without calling it climate change to get everybody to understand that it truly is an issue. So here's what happens. And what I try to do is explain to people from my travels in Central America. When I would be in El Salvador, I've known President Bukele since he was 12 years old. His father and I worked together for 15 years. And I remember going all over El Salvador with his father, who was an amazing businessman. And we would go out and we'd travel the whole country, and in Ruta Sonsonate or Antiguo Cuscatlan, we would go through the colonias and you would see where the people are living in the hillsides. And what happens is when the heavier storms and the hurricanes are coming in each year stronger and stronger, and they're wiping out those people's worldly possessions, the few pairs of shoes, the clothing on their back, the rudimentary roof over their head, and it would wash down the hillside, they had one option before them. Go forth, go northward, and find another opportunity. And that's why they come. But until we can get people to understand what extreme poverty is, they'll never understand why people come northward. And why are they coming? Reason number 2, they need an economic opportunity. They need a chance to have a dignified life, just like we all do. They're not asking for a luxury home in Manhattan or in Chicago or even here in San Antonio. They just want a dignified place to live. They don't even have to own it, but they want a roof over their head. They want food on their plates and they want clothing on their back. Reason number 3, violence. In the United States, we're all, I'm in Texas, so I'll be careful here, but I support the Second Amendment. My family's all hunters, they all have weapons, I do not. But our desire to have a weapon does not allow us to weaponize other countries. So we have to come to terms with our love of guns. We can love them all we want here and have as many as you want, but that doesn't give you the right to send them to Mexico, to send them to El Salvador, to send them to Guatemala, or other reasons, and that's what's happening. They've pleaded with the Congress to change the laws, but anytime we talk about doing laws around guns, it's a problem. Well, we can't continue this way. And so we need to understand that the challenges that are happening in Mexico, in Central America, are part of the responsibility of the American public. We need to recognize these realities, because it's true. Mexico's not making them guns. Mexico may have some people that are sending contraband this way, but the consumers are here. They're not consuming the drugs in Mexico, they're consuming them here. So we need to address the 3rd one, which was violence. And 4th, chronic malnutrition. Imagine being hungry. We're gonna feed you tonight. So if you're hungry now, if you just wait a little bit longer, once we get through the panel, and no pressure, Elaine, but between them having a drink is you, really, in the panel. But chronic malnutrition. In the country of Guatemala, 1 of 2 kids under the age of 5, 1 of 2 kids under the age of 5 suffers from chronic malnutrition. That is amazing to me. Guatemala is spending $1 billion US dollars annually to address chronic malnutrition, and they're making no progress. No progress. You may ask, how is that possible? It's cultural. With the indigenous communities that exist, there's lots of cultural issues and challenges that they have to try to overcome. In the US has been doing amazing work locally through USAID that has recently been shut off. We need to tell Congress to reinstate that support to get USAID moving again, because it's unconscionable. And when you have a child that needs to eat, what's he gonna do? The family's gonna come northward and find a job.